Quite a string of incidents have happened in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mention a number of them, but not in any particular order.
Yeah.
But the most recent is where a patient lost his life in one of our referral hospitals. And that shook the nation in terms of what could have happened, what did happen.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we have seen in the same healthcare environment, the staff who offer that medical care themselves getting addicted to drugs.
In the hospital?
In the hospital.
Wow.
And I'm going to come to that deep because there's so much that happens in the hospital.
A hospital, a place for healing, hope, and care. But what happens when the safety of these same walls is compromised?
We've seen bodies of deceased persons, loved ones, disappearing from hospitals.
Wow.
So there's something you've not heard of. But there's so much happening. Outside of that, we have found firearms in hospitals.
Wow.
Firearms with live rounds.
In hospitals?
Yes.
In a recent shocking incident where a patient was murdered within the walls of a hospital, the big question is, how did the adversary even manage to get into the hospital?
We allow everybody to come into a hospital. Everybody comes into a hospital. Therefore, that becomes a critical item. How do I allow everybody in this environment, but at the same time have systems in place to prevent crimes being committed by anybody who comes in?
Our guest in this episode, Mr. Chris Otieno, is the Secretary General of PROSAC. He is also a certified safety and security consultant with more than 25 years of experience in the health environment management.
We have seen abduction of infants from hospitals. And infants completely disappearing, completely wiped out. You can't tell where they've gone to. We have seen patients eloping from hospitals, patient elopement. We've seen patients wandering in a hospital. You have no idea where they come from.
What can be done better from a physical security standpoint?
There is so much that we can do. And let me start with the management aspect of it.
Yes.
Number one.
So what are you waiting for? This is the best chance for you to hit the subscribe button, like and share widely. And as always, keep it Crimeshield. This episode has been shot at Wojo, a premium co-working space located at Makua Hotel, Upper Hill, Nairobi. Get to enjoy a wide range of premium facilities, including premium working spaces, a fully equipped gym, swimming pool, and not forgetting their bottomless coffee. You can find their details down on the screen below. When we talk about healthcare security, a lot of things come to our mind. We did a conversation earlier on by Abdurizak, and it left us with many questions. And these are the questions that probably we are going to handle in this conversation. Today, I have an amazing guest who has a ton of knowledge and expertise in this particular sector. I don't want to tell you much. I'd rather he introduces himself today. Karibu sana, Chris. Karibu.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. And like you say, I have developed a lot of expertise.
You have?
In healthcare security. What laymen would call hospital, but we would call them, for example, environment of care or healthcare. Prior to that, I have served in several areas in both Kenya and outside of our republic, and I've gained a lot of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge across security. But I want to say categorically that I developed my skill in the healthcare environment. And I'm so glad, and I want to go into this so deep that we may actually open up this space to make everybody understand.
We have to. It only happens in the Crimeshield Podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I've got a master's degree in risk and security management from University of Leicester in UK. I'm certified security management professional and a string of other certifications, which I have used across my 25 years plus counting in executing, designing, planning, redesigning, and rethinking risks either globally or regionally. And I'm so glad to sit here this evening to really look at those questions that came out. And I want to give the very best.
Definitely.
Outside of that, I'm also current time the Interim Secretary General, National Secretary General of Protective and Safety Association of Kenya, And I'm so glad.
People know it as Prozac.
We know it as Prozac.
Yes.
Karibu
sana.
Asante.
Let's just dive directly.
Yes.
We talked about, security by sector. That is something that people in the security jargon is called SBS.
Yes.
And we are looking at many things that have happened even in the recent past. Let's look at the history and prevalence of incidences in our healthcare facilities. Take us through a little bit of what has happened and what can be done better in the physical security space.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Quite a string of incidents have happened in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mention a number of them, not in any particular order.
Yeah.
But the most recent is where a patient lost his life in one of our referral hospitals. And that shook the nation in terms of what could have happened, what did happen.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we have seen in the same healthcare environment, the staff who offer that medical care themselves getting addicted to drugs.
In the hospital?
In the hospital.
Wow.
And I'm going to come to that deep because there's so much that happens in the hospital. Outside of that, we've seen bodies of deceased persons, loved ones, disappearing from hospitals.
Wow.
So that's something you've not heard of. But
Yes.
there's so much that's happening. Outside of that, we have found firearms in hospitals.
Wow.
Firearms with live rounds.
In hospitals?
Yes. The other time our country was handling a neighboring country when terrorist activities were pretty high.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine that those United Nations Protection Forces that were there were being brought here in the Republic of Kenya to be treated, for treatment. And of course, we would say commanders of recruiting commanders. Of course, they want to come and approach those persons and give them the other side of the story in terms of recruitment and conversion. You served in that area. This is what has happened. Why don't you cross over and come to this side? Radicalization.
Yes.
That can also happen in hospitals. Outside of that, we have also other petty things that have big magnitudes. Let me go to one of our hospitals in the country of Kenya that's quite known for handling mother and baby care. And I want to mention the name. We have seen abduction of infants from hospitals. And infants completely disappearing, completely wiped out. You can't tell where they've gone to. We have seen patients eloping from hospitals, patient elopement. We've seen patients wandering in a hospital. You have no idea where they've come from.
Yeah.
And many other things that have happened in a hospital space until you sit down and ask yourself, what is it we exactly need to do? And the answer is right here. I'm going to give answers today. And I'm glad that you invited me for this discussion. Because this is a place where we give answers.
It's the only place, actually.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at a hospital, interesting facts, let me mention them.
Yeah.
The population mix in a hospital is interesting. You have the most qualified persons in any nation.
Yeah.
Doctors holding very high levels of education.
Yes.
And you have the least qualified persons.
In the same
In the same environment.
Okay.
When you come and look at them economically, you have guys who are earning a lot of money. And guys who are earning
peanuts.
And of course, that runs from top to bottom. And they're all those guys who are in there. So in terms of skills, in terms of economic capability, we are talking of both extremes. When you also go in the design of a hospital, you'll see that there are also very many units in there. And each unit is specialized in a particular item. For example, maternity unit,
Yes.
labor unit, psychiatric unit, pharmacy unit, and many other nursing units that constitute a hospital. All those are areas requiring specialization in terms of how a security person will plan himself to approach them and offer solution. What I call, in my consultancy, SBD, security by design.
By design.
You design it from inception, not design it onto it. Design it from inception.
You know, many people actually, and it's a cultural thing, security has to be built in, not on.
Absolutely.
And in most cases, you find that many people look at it as the last option. They don't even care about, in any budget, the security budget is usually the least.
Below there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things why we are that way across is because most of the time we operate our departments from a lack of mission. We need to behave like uniformed person going to an operation.
Yes.
An assignment. You have your mission.
Yes.
You have your labor or staffing distributed according to mission requirement.
Yeah. Mission in command.
Mission in command. And then from there is the deployment.
Yes.
So we are saying here in a healthcare environment, the security department must be a department that is set for service and with a mission.
Yes.
The critical mission here is to make sure that they give assistance to medical staff. That is the core business of any healthcare environment. Core business. So how do we plug in? We must be business enablers, not business disablers.
Yes.
So we must remove from our mind the traditional approach of security, which is intrusive and intuitive. We must remove that
And very
completely,
rigid. Yeah.
and start enabling business, the hospital business, to proceed on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In that, we must work very hard and smart to ensure that we are also providing a safe campus. The safety to ensure these medical staffs get an opportunity or an environment where they can offer their expertise without any disruption becomes our responsibility in that kind of environment. So we must design ourselves how we want to do that. And one of the ways is to enforce the corporate policies, because every corporate has policies that it wants to take down there to ensure that they're achieving their mission and the vision and all that with values is being achieved right well.
There's one thing that, Chris, I saw, and it's a cancer, especially in the security sector. Every hospital has a security manager. Some still call them CSOs. And, and I'm highlighting this because they have a budget and they need to, make sure that they use the budget to enable, as you put it, the hospital infrastructure.
Yes.
Why don't we have consultants being looked into? Why do we want to carry this burden alone?
Thank you very much. That is a lovely question. I've looked for any avenue to handle that question. One of the problems that ails our industry here in this Republic of Kenya and outside, and many other countries that are traveling to offer my solutions, is when security persons want to think of themselves as one-stop shop.
Foolproof.
Foolproof. You cannot be. If I have worked in an environment for about 2 years or 3 years, I now move into familiarity view mode. I view everything, that environment, something that I'm familiar with.
Yes.
We need to look at ourselves from this perspective, bring in an outsider to conduct an audit in my own systems. And this approach is going to be a combination of an external person, external consultant conducting an audit, with me, an internal person, where we attain a hybrid of that.
That is
of
the
course,
mission.
you have choices.
Yeah.
You can do that yourself, which is, of course, continual improvement in performance. You can bring an outsider, but the best solution is to
the hybrid.
When you bring that hybrid, and this person helps you look at the environment from a different perspective, then you find ways and means of relooking at the environment, even replanning yourself and redeploying the resource that you have as a person. And I also want to look at another aspect. We need to rise from calling persons in charge of security hospital from managers to directors. Why do I mean directors? Because a hospital in its own existence is almost like a town.
Yes.
You have all services in one place at one go. And all this must be coordinated. And the best person to do that is a director, not a manager. Manager manages resources.
Yeah.
A director directs resources.
So they need to remove their mindset from security managers to security directors.
Exactly. We need to remove that. But even as we remove that, the persons holding those positions must prove themselves worthy of that title. Right?
Yeah.
They must mainstream security and safety in the hospital environment so that it is seen like this is a service that we cannot do without, enabling us to design it from the word go, not to design onto it after. Because of designing onto it, that's why we have a title lowered, the management position. But in a hospital environment, you require a director, not a manager. A manager should come in as the next level, next consultative structure level, or next reporting level.
We've already highlighted on many things that happened in our hospital spaces. Without mentioning any names, what can be done better from a physical security standpoint?
There is so much that we can do. And let me start from the management aspect of it.
Yes.
Number one, as the operatives in the industry, we must drive this agenda so intricately to a level that our CEOs appreciate our presence. And even relook at recalibrating our title to directors, not managers. Right? The next thing, we must have a functioning structure within our own selves.
Okay.
Because we are targeting a mission that we've set forth to assist medical staff, enforce corporate policies, and maintain peace and order in that environment. Right? Now, when you come to examining that environment, we must first of all ask ourselves, which are my highest risk areas in that environment?
The critical assets.
The critical assets. And I must have critical response plans to any incidents that happen in the environment. Let's take, for example, a maternity ward.
Yes.
In a maternity ward, a critical risk is abduction. So we must sit down and find how do we match a mother and a baby and introduce a geofencing so that anytime a baby leaves that geofenced perimeter, we have an alarm and we have a plan to respond very fast to that island. You can understand that?
Yeah.
The next critical area is psychiatric area. The biggest risk in psychiatric area is patient abuse.
Yeah.
Patients are abused in that space. Patients are not treated well in that space. So we need, first of all, to address our own staff with reference to how do they handle mentally challenged or psychiatric patients. We've got incidents of rape. We've got incidents of, not worthy being mentioned because of the kind of the magnitude and the severity of what happens.
Yeah.
When you come, for example, to pharmacy, we have drugs there. Drugs that are controlled drugs. You don't want those drugs to leave that space and be consumed by persons not without prescriptions to consume those drugs. At the same time, we have transportation of food within a hospital, food service. They move from the kitchen, the preparation area to patient areas. And we know the kind of environment the hospital is. You do not want any contamination.
Yeah.
We have laundry area, a lot of linen, some linen and soil, a lot of things happen in those linen. You don't want that to be an environment where those kind of things, all right?
Hazmat risks.
Yes, transmit those risks to the next person.
Yeah.
The biggest aspect now, the biggest risk that we must look holistically, not going in the units, is how a hospital has been set up. Remember, this is an environment where people are recuperating from ailments.
Yes.
And we have visitors who come to visit them. And these visitors are part and parcel of that recuperating environment.
Okay.
We allow everybody to come into a hospital. Everybody comes into a hospital. Therefore, that becomes a critical item. How do I allow everybody in this environment, but at the same time have systems in place to prevent crimes being committed by anybody who comes in? Because when they come, we take them to the normal vetting.
Yes.
Searching and things like that. Sometimes they're not very accurate in terms of our searches. You see, sometimes guards, they are searching and they're on their phones. Which, of course, withdraws the quality assurance they want to put into that service. Right? So when they get into that space, then we hear what happened in the recent national discussion that really shook our nation.
Yeah.
When a patient lost his life in a healthcare environment.
And it's not the first time that is happening.
Sorry, it's not the first time. It's not the first time. There are lots of other cases that we have not mentioned. But the actual thing is, if you also go into these hospitals, you find limitations in security by design. For example, a nursing station. How should you design a nursing station? It must be in this aspect, that when a nurse is seated at the station, he or she is able to see all the wards and all the patients at one go.
Sifted.
Exactly. Designing the environment right. When that is not done in that particular manner, then you find incidents will happen there.
Yeah.
The person committing that offense will walk out. And will not that much later when you're going to administer drug to that patient. Then you realize we've lost this person. And when forensic examiners come in, they find that this is from strangulation. Or this is from other violent crime, things of that nature.
Yeah.
At access control points, a critical element comes out. And that critical element is the kind of quality service that we are offering there.
Okay.
We really must have a plan that integrates security performance into the grains of a hospital management. When that is left out, when guards are considered, when security is considered as a spending environment and not a business enabling environment, it becomes a difficult thing. Because we fail to invest in what we need to invest. You get it?
Yeah.
Right? And majority of guys will discuss electronic in the healthcare environment. Well, that is very good. But the critical item that we must always remember is that the human element of security is the most critical and the most formidable element of any security.
Yeah. Where everybody understands their role in security.
Not even just understanding the roles, which is good. Even to design and note what we require in that environment. So I'm saying the director level must be that level that we need the hospital. You should be able to look at that also holistically and see that here I require a camera, not just any camera.
But this type.
It must be AI enabled. It must have the ability of big data analytics. It must ingrain the 11 pillars of the advanced technologies that we are right now disrupting the whole world. It must be ingrained in there, in that sort of design. So what are we saying? There must be people who can speak to very many vendors and understand what solutions are out there and how do we bring those solutions into this environment to benefit us.
Even in faces.
Even in faces.
One critical area that you've, listening to you and it just came to my mind, the triage area. That is the first place that any patient.
Wow.
And how I look at that place is, in most of our hospitals, the design in its own does not even appeal.
Reflect.
Because even the sometimes you find out it goes to a level whereby people get misdiagnosed. how they are able to even store that kind of information about the patient, how they are handling it, despite the scarcity of resources sometimes. But I think it can be done better. Let's talk about the triage area, and that is the first area. What do you think can be done better in that space?
Number one thing is to appreciate that is the entry point of any persons who are coming to the hospital.
Yeah.
Emergency department is the entry point. Now, the risks that are involved in that department are not simple. You might, for example, find two accident drivers who disagree there, bringing the patient to the same hospital, and they meet in there. What do you expect then?
Whoa.
Violence. Outside of physical violence, there's also verbal aggression. The nurses and the healthcare workers who work in there, they also experience a lot of verbal aggression, either from doctors who work with them, or the doctors themselves from their seniors, or from the public to those healthcare workers. So number one item is a high risk of aggression, of violence. So what must we do to solve that? Number one, the design of that place must be, number one, that we have a dedicated, well-trained security person, and this training it should not just be the normal security training, access control, first aid. No. It must be how to handle an aggressive person. Tailored to that environment and to that particular zone. How do you de-escalate? How do you de-escalate when somebody is higher? For example, you could have a man and a woman coming and disputing on genetic makeup of the kid. They want a DNA mapping. Yes. The father here is saying, this is my kid. The one saying, this is not. This is mine. This is not. That kind of an argument that can easily escalate to something totally different. That can even include physical aggression, those stuff. So we must have a dedicated person who acts as a deterrent to any form of escalation. And one area that you've seen now is upskilling that kind of a person. They must be totally and completely trained. The next thing that we must have there is a complete provision of electronic guarding. We are talking about patient's bed having nurse calls. If a patient has a problem in that particular department, they can press very fast, and the response time, we must also evaluate our performance in reference to response time. If a nurse call is pressed by a patient, if we say 1 minute,
it is 1 minute.
Is 1 minute or less. We can accept that. Anything out of that,
it's unacceptable.
And we must also train our patients that this is what you need to use in the event of this kind of an occurrence. Going out of there, we must have cameras that are sound enabled. These cameras are sound enabled. We are able to listen into the conversation that is happening. So in the event that we pick up any form or any indication of an escalation or disagreement, then we have a person to respond very fast. And the kind of person deployed there, it's not going to be anybody. I mean, even me, I don't qualify with my physical appearance. It must be somebody who has complete physical dominance. And apart from that dominance, he's well trained. The next thing, our staff at that particular area, they must also be taught how to communicate in emergency situations.
De-escalating.
Even reporting. For example, I have a problem with the client. He was come. They're up. I tell the client, give me a minute. I make a call. Then you call the security number and leave the telephone head without disconnecting. So security are listening into what is happening there. And they're able to send a response. So when we sit down and look at those kind of designs, it becomes very good. Then there must be very clear separation between public spaces and patient areas, with complete restriction on what procedure public will require to access patient areas. If you design it that way, then you can create some form of a wall or deterrence that buys time to enable security to respond on or in time.
Let's look at vulnerable patients. The similarity between all these incidences that we've been seeing all the way from 2002, 2009, and the latest to 2015, and now 2025. One commonality is that where the aggressor, did their malice, the patients who are next to them were not in sound mind. Either they couldn't speak or they were in a position where they could not, testify. I'm talking about vulnerable patients. How can we then, put in measures to secure or safeguard vulnerable patients?
One thing that I mentioned there before, and there is something that really must use, is how we design our patient areas in reference to nursing station. A patient is there. Sometimes most of them are moribund. Sometimes they are weak. They require care. Right? So you don't expect to be as active as anybody who's out of that place, that space.
Yeah.
Right. So what will be the next layer of defense, or your first layer of defense, is that nurse who is there. We must ensure that we upskill those nurses to be able to recognize situations that could easily develop to become something that deteriorates out there and reduces the ability for the hospital to provide a secure environment for that patient to be cured. There must also be security programs that are targeted towards recognition, that are targeted towards deterrence, delay, things like that. And how do we do that? The persons or security persons working in a hospital must constantly conduct visibility patrols. They must be visible. They must be seen. And deployment must, for example, be in terms of traffic. When there is high human traffic, then we move into that space. All right? Our presence is required.
Yes.
For example, during visiting hours.
Yeah.
When it's not visiting hours, we reduce the number of persons that are visible out there. And we take those ones to other areas that require attention, because it's a cyclic kind of an environment.
Yes.
Right? And when we take them out there, they must be visible, known very well. For example, reflective jackets or things of that nature, that tells the public is a security person. Even their intervention, how they speak to people must show that they are security persons. There must also be a camera visibility. Our cameras must be visible. Alarms must be visible. Any form of electronic security that you want to deploy in a healthcare environment must be totally visible, and they must plug very well into our ability to respond to critical incidences that happen in the whole environment. When that is designed from that perspective, you find it becomes quite easy in terms of response, quite easy in terms of deterrence, quite easy in terms of delay and the whole process of disruption. But the critical item that we must consider as a department is creating security awareness programs. Everybody in that hospital, including our staff, must have some level of awareness created by ourselves, leaders in the security arena, on exactly what we expect and how we expect ourselves to respond. If we get a call, somebody says there's a bomb in the hospital, there must be an idea, what do we do in that kind of life? When patients leave their wards to get out of the hospital, security persons must have that eye to see, is this a patient or not a patient? And how do you do that? They always have something that is that they use in infusing. I'm forgetting the name of it. Infusing medicine into the systems. When someone comes again and he has that kind of an IV thing in there, you pick up that person as a patient, because any other normal person don't have that. When you have that extra eye, the wandering patients, eloping patients, we can eliminate these risks that are inherent to their environment of care.
One thing that we mentioned earlier, but I want us to shed a light. We have, right now, we are seeing that some people and most people really can't be able to foot bills. And we are talking about eloping patients, or patients who can decide to leave the medical center because one way or the other they couldn't foot the bill. And that is one common thing that I'm sure can be deterred by having a good plan, as you put it. How then can we restrict or mitigate such risks? Because at times you find that there are people who are admitted, but because they feel that probably they can't foot the bill, they find their way out. How can we mitigate that?
There are many ways to mitigate that. Number one thing is due diligence conducted by the hospital on the people they admit. There must be, for example, a minimum in terms of cash deposits or collaterals to enable us know that we can go full throttle to offer our service to this person, because it will be affordable. Sometimes you find hospitals taking patients, they do not conduct due diligence on them. The bill builds up, they don't contact family members, right? And the bill keeps building up. The next time family members show up is the tune of 6 figures. The family cannot be able to afford. So the most critical item here is due diligence, and work with the family day by day. Keep finding out how this bill going to be settled. Are there assurances? Is there a deposit that we must? In the last hospital that I worked in, for you to go to an ICU department, for you to take a patient to ICU department, there could be there needed to be a certain deposit that you give for. That cushions, more or less like insurance. It cushions. You also need
transferring
to check,
the risk.
Do we have? Does the patient coming to us have insurance? What's the insurance limit? When you hit that limit, then you start having conversation with the family. Do not keep patients or family of patients without this communication on the build-up of bills. If you keep them out, they will not be prepared. The next thing you find, asking security to come and arrest them. No, that's not the right way for you to do it, because it goes down in deteriorating our reputational the reputation of that organization.
Yeah.
Or it elevates our security risk from either medium to next level. Right? So how do we mitigate that? We start having these conversations with the family, with the family of the patient, and be very gradual as the bill builds up. When that is taken from that perspective, we find ourselves mitigating that risk in the best way possible and eliminating that. If we get to a level 5, this patient are not able to pay a particular level, then we recommend transfers towards what are affordable to them.
Yes.
Our government of Kenya offers medical interventions at very cost-effective levels. They can be moved from private hospitals to government hospitals, and even further. Now, just make sure that they are being able to take care of their bills.
We looked at, like the pharmacy as a segment and a critical asset to be protected. And I'm looking at the supply chain. We've seen some areas or some pharmacies in some hospitals, aiding the spread of restricted drugs, for that matter. How can we mitigate that space?
We have a pharmacies and poisons board in this country, but it's a very good regulator of these kinds of instances that affect this medical profession. So what are we saying here? There must be policies and regulations passed by a regulator. For example, do not dispense drugs without a prescription. Clearly label which drugs should be controlled and how do they get to the patient level. The patient level, right? So when you have this kind of interplays where we have a regulator spelling out very clearly on what are dangerous drugs and the mode of dispensation, when you have very clearly on who can own a pharmacy in this country, not just anybody. You must attain a certain skill level, a certain academic qualification, a certain experience in your life for you to run a pharmacy. And these are the stipulations, regulations on how you run a pharmacy and how you dispense drugs. When we can work ourselves from a regulated level in our country, right, and stick to those regulations as values, then we can find it coming very easily for us to run pharmacies that do not endanger the space where drugs get dangerous drugs easily dispensed to the population of this Republic of Kenya.
So that will really take away the aspect of people doing, dark deals on the sides.
Yes. It can take away that in a proportion. But there are still many more other interventions that we need to bring holistically to ensure that we are addressing this problem from a country level, right? And one of them could be like, for example, when dangerous drugs like pethidine is prescribed to a patient, then that must be from pharmacy to dispensation. Eliminate the possibility of storage in the wards. Because if you store in the ward, and the kind of safeguards we have to control those of that could be, for example, a safe guarded with
PIN password.
It becomes very, and those nurses work on rotational basis. The process of handover, it could not be very good. So along the way, we end up losing. But if we say from pharmacy to dispensation, it becomes easy to control those kind of drugs, and they don't find their way. And anybody arrested out there, right, dealing negatively with this kind of dangerous drugs must face the full force of it.
There's one thing that comes out, very critical in this conversation, and I wouldn't want to miss it. It's how, where the cyber and physical areas collide or integrate, what we've called the hybrid. And I want to mention a little bit of, I don't want to veer off to the cyberspace so much. How do we then take care of the information of the patients and even the workflow? Because sometimes you have high level, or critical patients who have the information can be used against them at some point and things like that. How do we use security to make sure that we can mitigate such?
Thanks for that question. There are very many ways. And one way is to admit that patient not in his usual or her usual name. That would be one area. Right?
Okay.
Because we are doing this purely to protect the information of that person. The next thing, we need to have wings or units in the hospital that take a certain class of persons. For example, if you are admitting the President of the Republic of Kenya, not the hypothetical situation.
Yes.
All right? How do you admit him? You can't admit him with his current name. Right? There must be some discourse to make sure the information that we are holding there from that VIP person of the Republic of the Nation is held in a certain way. But even as we think about that, we must clearly note that we are in 21st century and we are in Industry 4.0 technology.
Yes.
Advanced technology, where we have 11 pillars that are quite critical. It is important that hospitals advance their investments in these technologies to ensure that we are protecting our data and adhering to regulations and requirements, that this data does not just find itself to other people. Cybersecurity, number one item, is a critical disruptive feature or one of the advanced technology that we have right now. We must make sure that even as we operate in this ICT space, we have cybersecurity safeguards that protect our environment of ICT or ICT backbone, that nobody gets time or finds it easy to go into that space. Simple start areas, for example, firewalls, email passwords, right? Next thing is multi-factor authentication. We must go into those kinds of spaces and ensure that we have really well-developed cyberspace or cyber defenses that protect us against our information leaking. Our staff must know about phishing mails, phishing mails, malwares, trojans. They must be educated step by step for them to know. So that when I receive an email, for example, saying ceo@thishospital.com, then I can sit and say, my CEO's email address is not this way. It is .org.hosp. That's the organizational hospital. That tells me the domain that's come from. When it's come from a .com, then I must know very well. This is not an email that I need to deal with. Right? So we must create that awareness amongst our staff on the cyberspace or the cyber fraud, and creating our defenses to make sure that we are well. When you come, for example, to our CCTV or other electronics that we have in the environment, they capture a lot of information. This information must be encrypted. It must be stored. And that storage, you must safeguard it with the authentication methods. And when we come up with those authentication, for example, passwords, they might not just be my name and my year of birth. No, there must be small letters, there must be asterisks, there must be upper cases, lower cases, all those. And we must give ourselves, for example, say, this password must be changed every 1 month. And in the next 8 months, you cannot repeat the password that you used 8 months ago. We create a good space. And time and again, we audit our cyberspace. How are we in terms of our cyber posture? How are we in terms of physical security posture? If we find our posture good enough, we work to enhance. If we find it poor enough, we redo the whole thing. Just make sure we're always on top of industry best practices. And that we are good at application, and we are good at execution, and even designing them. And that makes us better.
I want us to speak to the service providers or the people who offer the services in the hospital. We talked about aggressive patients. We're talking about, heated up moments and things like that. How can doctors, nurses, the guys in charge of the pharmacy, handle themselves in a way that their situational awareness is high? How can they conduct themselves in a way, even when it's the heat of the moment, they're able to de-escalate issues? Especially right now when we are having a lot of back and forth in terms of how people pay for their medical care and things like that. Most of the times they will receive patients who are already aggravated, and they get that pressure, and sometimes it becomes so difficult to perform their duties even though they are trained. We're talking about their mental well-being and things like that. How can doctors handle?
Good question. The first critical item that's the person, HCW, so healthcare workers, must think of is the service side of security. Remember, security offers two services in the hospital. The essential services, what we do on a daily basis. And then the auxiliary services, what we come as to support the service that we are offering. Now, when we have aggressive patients, healthcare workers must recognize one aspect. That security can come into offer service known as patient restraint. How do we restrain a patient without hurting the person? To make sure that healthcare workers are offering the intervention that is required. Sometimes also you find patients coming to a hospital and they're in chains. They're under security, either from the UN or from the government. Or their person of interest in the criminal environment of the nation. Right? How do we respond? How do we act to those kinds of patients? Right? Security must be the enablers to ensure that our nurses understand the kind of person that is being brought in the environment of care. They must explain that very well to them and know how that person should be handled. Because if you let a nurse go there with knowledge, maybe that person can turn to be aggressive to that nurse, and the nurse might end up with physical injuries or assault that ends up really demotivating the rest of the staff in the environment, and they end up not offering the service that is required. When persons come to the hospital environment arguing or verbally aggressive to one another, or even to healthcare staff workers, then we must have a de-escalation formula. And this includes having specialized person within that environment that can be able to speak to them and de-escalate. When they go physical, then that one security must be able to come in and intervene. And the intervention must also include physical intervention. But when it's a verbal aggression, we need to be very proactive and escalated in how we respond to that.
Progressive,
that's the right word, sorry. Not escalated, progressive. I cannot come here and find me and you argue, then they bring in security, and they start arresting people. That's the wrong intervention. We must have, for example, nurses start. When nurses start, next level sister. Sisters start, the person in charge. When they cannot handle customer service, when customers cannot handle, then we go to the next level. It could be security and administration in many areas. So there must be that plan in place, practiced by all persons, that is named Critical Incident Management Plan. That must be there. And the tenets must be very well clearly stated, and we must have drills on how is that. Having scenarios, emulating, mimicking. If this happens, what do we do? And when that knowledge is shared down the ladder of reporting, then we find ourselves prepared.
One thing that stands out in this conversation is that security is not cheap.
Not cheap at all.
And we really need to get that in our minds and change that culture, because in most cases people look at the return on investment in the security space, and they look at it as an expense. They don't look at it as an enabler. Speaking to the owners of these hospitals, what can be your message to them?
My message to the owners of the hospital, maybe be it private, be it government, is that security is part and parcel and the mainstream of these organizations. We offer critical services. Like I mentioned, two categories. One, essential, and next one, auxiliary services. The essential services are core to ensuring that our healthcare workers provide the right quality of medical intervention that is required for those patients. The next one is through the works of what we do, we enable a peaceful environment that ensures that medical staffs can be able to offer the quality kind of medical care that the hospital or environment of care aspires to offer to its clients. Lastly, we maintain peace, law and order in that environment. We are like the police of a nation in a hospital, right? Imagine they withdraw all our policemen, traffic, crime, and all those policemen.
There'll be chaos.
The kind of chaos that would be. So when CEOs sit down and start looking at security department or division in a hospital from that perspective, then you find that becomes an aura where we can now start mainstreaming security in the environment of care. Outside of that, ourselves as career practitioners, we must also drive that agenda. How do you drive that agenda? We participate in the decision making of the hospital.
That's why they have to be called directors.
We utilize the right resources to intervene in the risks that are existing in the healthcare environment, both inherent and emerging. The kind of skills that we must bring to support or work in the security environment must not just be anybody. Even me and you ex-armies or things like that. It doesn't mean that that's a guarantee for the right performance. No. We must internalize that environment, train in that environment. And the training that we are talking about here, not just any kind of training, tailor-made to that hospital environment to ensure that when I'm going out and dispense my duties, I am confident because I've got the right skill that is required for me to dispense my services to the level that ensures that the quality of my service is appreciated. So we must distinctly, with quality, and enable business to perform well in a hospital, and that comes back to us. When we get out of the guns, guards, and gates, and come into directing, come into planning, come into design, come into ROI. ROI could mean two things. Return on investment and report of investigation. It could mean two things there. When we distinctly look at that from that professional approach, then we can ingrain ourselves to be appreciated in that environment that we work in.
So even as practitioners and professionals, we have to understand our role.
We have that responsibility, that heavy burden, to carry the appreciation and for us to add value in the entire value chain of a hospital. It becomes our responsibility.
I want us to look briefly on the future trends. You talked about the emerging threats that can evolve. What do you see from where you sit? Or what kind of trends do you think can come in the future in terms of the risks?
I want to mention one thing
Yeah.
that could seem a bit retrogressive, but is now emerging as a risk.
Yeah.
High number of security incidences in hospitals.
It's now becoming a trend.
It is a worrying.
Yeah.
It is worrying.
Yes.
Calling people like myself to come out of our reserve to speak about healthcare security
Yeah.
because of what is happening in the forefront.
Yeah.
So what are we saying? The weakest link in any security formation, be it uniform or be it non-uniform, government or private, all right, is a human capital.
Yes.
If the human capital becomes dysfunctional, that becomes a very big risk. And why are we seeing incidences happening in our nation right now? Worrying incidences, really life-threatening incidents.
Yeah.
It is because the human capital that we are having right now being deployed to hospitals are no longer specializing in that environment. We are taking any Tom, Dick and Harry and deploying in that environment. That needs to change. Even those of us who are sitting on security budgets in hospitals, we need to work around the clock to ensure that we are upskilling any person who comes to us.
Yeah.
That means selection and training must be a big focus for us.
It has to
Because
be
if we do
continuous.
not focus on that, then we are creating an environment where the human capital or the human element of a complete security is becoming dysfunctional. And as soon as they become dysfunctional, then the ripple effect of risk crystallizing and materializing that whole environment becomes something. That's what we are seeing right now.
Now, how do we balance, healthcare and, security and patient's care? Because there's a very thin line.
Extremely thin line.
Yeah.
And the balance would be to have a very clear separation of who are healthcare workers and who are security services providers.
Assigning roles.
Assigning roles. And that must not be distinguished as categorical service performances. No. We say that healthcare workers have a hint of what security is all about. Because we've done in our programs a security awareness creation program where we tell them what to expect and how to manage it and how to de-escalate it. But when we keep it like we're keeping it right now, that hospital security managers or security managers countrywide hold the entire information, the bulk of information, we are disservicing ourselves. We also need to look at these guys in charge of security in the hospitals, bringing consultants like myself and yourself, to help them have another bird's eye view on the risks that are inherent and the risks that are emerging and how they organize themselves.
It has to be continuous.
Them, for example, staffing numbers. How do you attain staffing numbers? Is work available against the human capital?
Actually, Chris, what happens is that the people who own the hospitals, and this is something that I've also seen generally in security. Somebody wants to direct you on the numbers without how did you reach that number in the first place? You receive an email, somebody is telling you that I want X number of personnel to secure this premise. How did you even arrive at that number?
But the worst thing, very good question. The worst thing is that we are told and we go by it. So we completely water down the essence of a critical element in our side, risk
assessment
by RCBA.
Oh yeah.
Corrective action required.
Yes.
What do? I would not agree you tell me bring me 10 people. I'll tell you allow me to do my risk assessment. Allow me to look at the critical areas of your environment. For me to use my expertise to bring forth exactly what we require. Maybe you'd say 10 and I would see 3. Of course, supporting that with the electronic security. Maybe you tell me 10 and I need 20.
Even
and
50.
Supporting that, I'm 50. Right? But like you said, the worst thing is that we are told and we accept. Because we have commoditized, we've done commoditization of the security service. It has been commodified. It's now a selling business. It's now no longer a service. It's a commodity.
People are making money.
People are making money.
And it's all about the money.
Yes. We're forgetting that we require expertise here. Even when you bring in electronics, you must remember one thing. That there are two differences between electronic security and human security. Electronic security are consistent.
Yes.
Cameras don't lie.
They'll
give you what is there. But when you come to me as a human, I've got intuition. And I've got adaptability.
Yes.
A camera can show me somebody coming through that fence. Tell me nothing about that person. But I see the suspicious activity that person is carrying. That person is an intruder. And a determined intruder.
Yes.
So I'll make a decision to act. But a camera will just show me and not do anything. So we must know that difference. And we must bring the two of them together in what we are now calling, cyber physical convergence.
Yes.
In healthcare security solutions or in industrial security solutions. And we must pursue that. That's the next trend. That is in the future. That's happening in the future.
The future is now.
Yes, the future is now. We are seeing a lot of security persons not able to operate, for example, or not knowing what artificial intelligence is,
Yes.
what BDA is, big data analytics,
Yes.
or what machine learning is. We need to have security persons knowledgeable in those industrial pillars of technology and those disruptive features, and how we use them to benefit ourselves, and how we use them to make sure that we are adding value in the value chain that is present in the environment we're in charge of securing.
I want us to talk to the next generation. You know, we haven't completed, but I know because we'll have you again and again.
I'll be glad.
I want us to talk to the next generation. Somebody seated out there, Crimeshield, we call them the Crimeshield Premier. We want to speak to them. Somebody is looking at you, Chris, and is saying, I want to be like you.
Right.
And they want to be able to categorically look at situations, you know, with a view of an expert.
Right.
How can they build themselves to that level of excellence?
Number one thing, security has changed the technology, and we know the Gen Zs are very good in technology.
Yeah.
Please remember one thing. We even
They're
having
better.
Autonomous robots right now in security. You go to Dubai, you find autonomous policemen, robots.
Yeah.
They are patrolling.
I saw the other day, Chris. I saw the other day. I think it's Japan or China.
Yes.
When the police are doing the buddy system and doing their patrols,
Yes.
they have something that looks like a wheel
Yes.
that can make arrests.
Robotics. So these guys must know one thing, that security is also moving towards technology.
Yeah.
And they must make sure that they are good technology-wise. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, BDA, supply chain management, lateral and vertical manufacturing, right? All those things, they must make sure they are good in that, right? Because the traditional security persons like myself, we are coming from a physical intervention,
Yes.
and are now coming to that integration or convergence of cyber physical. Even the physical aspects that we deploy out there, they are showing artificial intelligence gradually,
Yes.
more and more.
Yeah.
The other day, United Nations was telling Israel, do not use autonomous weapons against those people. Machines do not make decisions to kill human beings, right? Human beings must make that decision.
They have to.
So they must realize that we are gradually moving into technology advanced space where technology is going to offer a number of solutions. But even though that is going to be the future, human intervention will not be eliminated whatsoever. Human intervention will always be there. We control machines. We give input.
We're the ones who put the
program
code.
them.
Yeah.
Everything is done by ourselves. So they must continue to develop themselves in those two spaces. Those two spaces, core spaces. And as we go on, the environments will change. More sophisticated interventions will come in, and we will need human capacity to be able to adapt and manage that. And they are the future. These youngsters are the future.
Wow.
And they must think along that direction. I am here studying category what I am studying because I've acquired this from experience. I have gone to school to do that. I have learned that in the field. I've interacted with formidable guys like yourself and many others in the field. And that makes me good. I'm the SG of PROSA.
Yes.
Right? And in that SG, I interact with so many capabilities.
They need to come.
They will come. And they need to know that when you go in that kind of space, where you are discussing industry best practices with experts, things become much easier. And they open up your eyes. So let's invite them to come and join PROSAC. Let's invite them to come and join Crimeshield Podcast and discuss their worries and their fears and how to get intervention or help on that kind of a nature. And then we can be able to build the next line of security persons.
Chris, I'm sure we can talk for the whole day, but we have a culture at the Crimeshield Podcast where, you know, we have questions from previous guests.
Right.
And they write the questions that I see them for the first time here.
Right.
And then they give you an opportunity. We will give you an opportunity to also draft. Yeah. So our previous guest is called Madam Vicky. She's the director of AROP Group.
Yeah.
And this is what she asked. On ensuring integrity in the industry, what legacy would you like people to remember of you?
The legacy that I want people to remember of me is somebody who has made it through the ranks. Somebody who has advanced himself through industrial hands-on experience. Somebody who has advanced himself through academic advancements. Somebody who has advanced himself through interaction with industry players, better than myself, my level or my lower level. And the next thing is to be solution-oriented. Solution-oriented, I'm speaking, speak to as many vendors out there as is possible. Even those vendors, they offer solutions.
Yeah.
Solutions that when I'm sitting here offering my service, I might not be knowing what it is. But when I speak to a vendor, I'll hear, all right, you know what? Cameras are nowadays solar powered with AI, completely autonomous cameras.
Yes.
Right? And they cost this much. Cost effectiveness and efficiency of this much. They can offer this in terms of productivity and all that. So that should be the thing.
Yeah.
I want to leave a legacy where I'm able to mentor the upcoming generation. I am able to interact professionally to the required level with the guys of my caliber. I am able to challenge those guys who are above me, and I'm progressively advancing myself to that next level and that next level, that level. By the time I am leaving this space, right, my aspiration, right, is to be somewhere as a consultant in the U.S. intelligence agencies.
Amazing. Now, you also get a chance to draft your question as I wind up the show. I hope the people watching out there, you've heard it from the expert, that security in our healthcare sector is something that is not only a one-man show. It is something that requires collective intervention. And the best way to go about it is to understand the ropes, understand what is required of you as a patient, as a worker in the hospital space. You bear the solutions. This is a space where we have candid conversations about safety and security, and you heard it from the best. And this is my bid to you out there. Tell a friend to tell a friend, because these conversations, they save lives. Let's make safety and security a continuous process in terms of communication, in terms of sharing widely, in terms of telling people what really is the cause of these pain points. You can find this nowhere else but the Crimeshield Podcast. Until next time, keep it Crimeshield.